Girl, how could you get me sent to jail? What's wrong with you? Hey y'all, welcome and/or welcome back to my channel. My name is Janae, if you didn't know, and today's video is another true crime episode, so if you're ready, let's go. Alright y'all, we've been rocking with these same nails for the last 3 videos. I told y'all that I thought that this set was gonna last me, and here they are, lasting, but I think this is the last time y'all gonna see this set because I'm ready to switch it up. But yeah, y'all, we just gonna go ahead and hop right into today's case. And if you've been rocking with me for a little minute now, then you already know that we are going from the front to the back of America in alphabetical order. So from Alabama to Wyoming, and today we are in Oklahoma. And I already know that a lot of y'all probably think that we're about to be in Tulsa today because it would have been so easy for us to be in Tulsa today. However, we are not. We are actually in a place called Depew, Oklahoma, which is roughly about 45 minutes to an hour away from Tulsa. And in Depew, at the end of September of 2002, there's a man named John Wright who is mowing the grass at the Depew Methodist Church when a man riding his bicycle stops in front of the church. And when he stops, he and John exchange their pleasantries, hey, how you doing? And eventually enter into a full-blown conversation. And during this conversation, John finds out that this man's name is Scott Eisenberg, and he's from Detroit, and he's literally just passing through on his bike. He tells John that he's riding his bike from Detroit to San Diego in order to help raise money for the victims of 9/11. And in addition to having so many questions about that, I could not help but think about Forrest Gump running his ass across America. Anyway, Scott asked John if it was cool if he pitched a tent on the lawn for the night because, again, he's just riding through. He ain't got nowhere to stay for real. And John was like, no. I got a better idea though. How's about you stay in the fellowship hall tonight? It's inside, it got air conditioner, and it's overall just better than sleeping outside. And Scott took John up on this offer and stayed in the fellowship hall overnight. But not only did he just stay the night, he actually woke up and ended up attending church service the next morning. And before, during, or after this church service, John introduced Scott to his wife, Carla, and to his daughter and son-in-law, Kathy and Mark Biggs. And in addition to introducing Scott to his family, John also introduced Scott to his neighbors, AJ and Patsy Cantrell. And while Scott didn't have plans to stay long in Depew, he did stay long enough after this Sunday service meet and greet to offer his help to Mark. Because at some point, Mark had mentioned a boot and western wear store that he had, and he said that he had a machine in there that wasn't working. And Scott told him that he used to be an engineer at Ford Motors and that he could potentially fix the machine for him. And Mark was like, oh, okay, cool, bet. So after the church service, John took Scott to Mark and Kathy's house where he started working on the machine. And I'm not sure if he finished working on the machine that day or not, but he ended up spending the night at the Biggs' home. And it was a couple of days later when Scott told the Wrights and the Biggs that he needed to head out. He was on his way to Edmond, Oklahoma. And so he hopped on his bike and was about ready to ride out. However, all 4 of them, Carla, John, Mark, and Kathy, all told him that it would not be the safest move or the smartest to ride his bike from Depew to Edmond. And so on October 1st, 2002, one of these 4 people dropped Scott off in Edmond, Oklahoma. And Edmond was about roughly an hour's drive away from Depew. And once Scott was dropped off, that was it. That was the end of their little encounter with Scott. Until around Thanksgiving when Scott ended up calling John and he told John, like, listen, I'm coming into town. It would be great to see you. I'm catching the bus into Tulsa. It should be here on this time at this day, woo-de-woo-de-woo. And John was like, oh, okay, bet, cool. We would love to see you. Who picking you up? And Scott was like, hey, I don't know, but you know, I'm gonna figure it out like I always do. And it's at this point where I wondered if he still had his bike. I don't know. It really has no relevance to the story, but I just wanted to know. Anyhow, John is like, no, don't worry about who's gonna come and pick you up. I'm gonna be busy, but I'm gonna call up Mark to see if he can come and grab you. So John hit up Mark like, hey, Scott coming into town. Can you go pick him up from the Tulsa bus station? Yada, yada, yada. And Mark is like, all right, cool, no problem, Pops, I got you. And as promised, Mark goes to pick up Scott from the bus station in Tulsa. And during their 45-minute ride back to Depew, they had a little bit of time to chit chat. And Scott ends up telling Mark that his wife and kids died in a car accident and he don't got nowhere to go. Now, while Mark couldn't offer him up a place to stay right then and there without talking to his wife first. He was able to offer him somewhere to be on Thanksgiving so that he wouldn't have to be alone. And so Scott, the Biggses, and the Wrights celebrated Thanksgiving, had a nice little turkey dinner, complete with Carla's homemade pumpkin and apple pies. And once Thanksgiving dinner was over, Mark talked to Kathy and told her the situation that Scott was in, and they decided that it would be cool for him to stay. And so they let him know that he could stay. And while Scott was staying there, he was telling all his business. He was constantly talking about his wife and kids, the accident they was in, and the fact that he was about to get an over $1 million settlement from a trucking company. And I don't know if it was this man's charm, charisma, or this expectation of money that got her, but Kathy and Scott have started having an affair right under Mark's nose. And roughly 2 weeks or so post-Thanksgiving, on December 13th, 2002, Scott told Mark that his services was no longer needed. He told him that he was going to be the one taking care of Kathy and her son Tyler, who I do not believe was Mark's child. But yeah, he going to take care of Kathy and Tyler with this settlement money. And Mark, you can go. And I don't know. It don't sound like Mark had any fight in him because he left that same day. So he might have been over it already or already knew about the affair. But yeah, he didn't put up a fight. He was like, y'all don't want me here, bye. And obviously, or maybe not so obviously, Mark and Kathy ended up getting a divorce. And once they divorced, Kathy moved out of the marital home and she moved into an apartment in Tulsa with Scott. And from everything that I was able to gather, Kathy made enough money to the point where Scott didn't have to work because she was an RN in Lawton, Oklahoma. And Lawton is close to 3 hours away from the apartment that she shares with Scott in Tulsa. But it was cool though because Kathy worked 6 days on and 6 days off. And on the days where she was working, she would be staying in Lawton. But on her 6 days off, she would go back home and be in Tulsa. And this was their little arrangement up until August of 2003. And by this time, the relationship between Scott and Kathy is in the dumps. And Kathy she's over it. And so she told Scott to grab his bike and ride out. Literally, she told him to move out. I don't care where you go, you can't stay here no more. And not only did she kick Scott out, but she moved out of the apartment as well. And she went back to Depew to live with her parents, John and Carla. And once she moved back in with her parents, she got an order of protection against Scott. And I'm gonna just go out on a limb here and say it's probably because Scott was abusive towards Kathy. There was nothing that I read that stated that, but based off of the details of the case and where today's case goes, I'm gonna say that was a fair assessment of me to make. Anyhow, now that nobody was living in the apartment in Tulsa, Kathy decided to cut the utilities off because it really ain't no sense of paying where you ain't staying. I mean, she was still gonna be paying the rent there even though she wasn't living there, but she didn't have to pay the rent at her parents' house, and so paying the rent at this apartment wasn't gonna be no big deal just up until the lease was up. But the utilities, cable, water, and all that stuff, wasn't no sense of having none of that on if they wasn't gonna be there. And so after she cut off the utilities, Kathy continued on with her life, not thinking twice about that apartment until it was time to pay the rent in September. But then it was also in September when she realized that she forgot to cut off the cable at the apartment. And I'm just guessing it's probably because she might have got a bill that said she owed some money and she was like, damn, I forgot to cut off the cable. So she called the cable company, probably in an effort to get the bill voided or reduced, seeing as how nobody was there watching or using the cable anyway. And the people at the cable company was like, girl, you tried it because this cable has been used for the past 24 to 36 hours. Somebody's been flicking and flipping through them channels. I don't know what you're talking about, girl, pay your bill. And once she heard somebody actually had been using the cable, she knew that it was Scott. She knew that he broke into that apartment and was chilling watching TV. And so she called the Tulsa police. And sure enough, once they showed up, Scott was in the apartment watching TV. And because of this, he was arrested and booked on burglary charges. And real quick, I'm just kind of curious as to how he was watching TV with no electricity, because Kathy got the utilities cut off. Anyhow, Scott stayed in jail until early October of 2003. And when he got out, he was hot. He was pissed off at Kathy because, girl, how could you get me sent to jail? What the fuck is wrong with you? And so he wanted his get back. And so he devised a plan to make Kathy pay for getting him locked up. Now, one would think that in an effort to get Kathy back, he would go to the place in which Kathy was staying, which was John and Carla's house, her parents. But no, his plan included going to the Cantrell's house instead. Remember the neighbors that John had introduced him to on that first day at church? Yeah, they lived directly across the street from John and Carla. And Scott's idea was to break into their house so that he could watch the Wright's house to see when Kathy pulled up. And after breaking into AJ and Patsy's home, Scott decided to start snooping around. And as he was snooping around, he found a .410 shotgun. I don't know how to say that. I think it's .410 caliber, .410. I don't know. Anyway, he found a shotgun along with some bullets. And of course, he's going to steal it. And I'm almost 100% sure that he was going to use this shotgun to shoot Kathy as soon as he seen her come home. However, Kathy didn't make it back to her parents' house before the Cantrells made it back to their house. So AJ and Patsy walk into their house unsuspecting because they not expecting nobody to be there. And before they could even think, blink, or react to what they were seeing, Scott shot Patsy, killing her instantly. And once AJ ran towards the sound of the gunshots to check on his wife, instead of shooting him as well, Scott ended up beating him to death with the shotgun. And after killing them, he dragged both of their bodies to the bathroom. AJ was 76 years old and Patsy was 70. Now, after dragging their bodies to the bathroom and getting a quick little snack, Scott made his way across the street to John and Carla's house. And once he got over there, he bust through the front door. And the first person that he encountered was Kathy's 16-year-old son, Tyler. And Tyler, who's not only startled by the fact that their front door was just kicked open, is also baffled to see Scott standing in the doorway with a gun looking pissed in the face. And Tyler's first instinct was to run. Unfortunately though, he didn't make it too far before Scott shot him in the back. And then made his way into the kitchen where Carla was baking a cake. And once he made it to Carla, Scott proceeded to beat her with the shotgun, only stopping when he heard Tyler's pickup truck in the driveway start up. Because he like, ain't no way I just shot Tyler in the back and he out in his pickup truck about ready to drive off. But he was. Even though Tyler had gotten shot in the back, he somehow made it out to his truck so that he could go get help. So Scott ran outside and he see Tyler pulling off. But because Tyler is severely wounded, he's not moving as fast as he would like. He's going as fast as he can, but he damn sure ain't no Speedy Gonzalez right now. And so Scott has the opportunity to run and jump into the bed of the truck. And when Tyler sees this, he starts driving down the road, swerving, trying to get Scott out of the bed of his truck, but it's not working. And unfortunately, Scott is able to get off another shot and he shoots Tyler in the shoulder. And once Tyler is shot in the shoulder, he like, I gotta figure something out. And so he drives the truck into a pole on purpose because he knows that the sound of a car crash is going to bring the people running to help. And he was right. Once he crashed into this pole, the people came running. But in the commotion of it all, Scott was able to walk away and hop into the car with a Good Samaritan who just thought that Scott needed help. And this Good Samaritan's name is John Inman. And I'm gonna call him Mr. Inman because we already got a John in this story. So Mr. Inman picks Scott up and Scott got this big ass gash on his forehead that is bleeding profusely. And he tells Mr. Inman that he just needs to get to Carla and John's house. And Mr. Inman is looking at him and he like, sir, you need a hospital. And Scott was like, okay, bet, cool. Just let me go to my house and grab a couple things first. And Mr. Inman is like, all right, cool. But after that, I'm taking you straight to the hospital. And so Scott leads him down this road and that one before Mr. Inman realizes that Scott got him in an isolated area. And so this is when he pulls over and tells Scott to get the hell out of his car. He don't care how he get help, if he get help or when, but he got to get out now. And so as Scott is slowly sliding out of Mr. Inman's car, he points the shotgun at him. And it's at this point when Mr. Inman grabs the shotgun and kind of diverts it away from him. And it's at this exact moment when Scott pulls the trigger, shooting the gun, barely missing Mr. Inman. And once that shot was let off, Mr. Inman slammed his car into drive and peeled out, leaving Scott on the side of the road looking stupid in the face. And he drove straight to the police station. However, even after giving a description and telling them everything that happened, the police were unable to find Scott. And at some point, they find out that not only had he just tried to kill Mr. Inman, but he's the prime suspect in Patsy and AJ's murders, the assault on Carla, and the attempted murder of Tyler. And so an all-out manhunt begins. And while they look for him, Scott is evading capture by hiding out in the woods between Depew and Bristow. And at some point, he ended up burglarizing a man named Rodney Lewis's house. And during this robbery, he stole some clean clothes, some food, and a .380 handgun, leaving behind his bloody clothes as I guess a parting gift. And after roughly 11 days of woodwork and burglary, Scott secretly takes up residence at the Depew Methodist Church, the church where this whole case started at. And one day while he's taking up this secret residency, it was November 3rd.
It was the 23rd, actually.
2003. A church volunteer had come to the church to do her thing, and she uses her key to get into one of the rooms of the church. And once she opened the door, she sees Scott standing there with a gun. And upon seeing this, she was like, oh, hell no. I have lived 75 good old years, and this is not the way I'm going out. She ran out of there so fast, you would have thought this lady was Sha'Carri Richardson, okay? She left her keys in the door and everything. And seeing as how she left her whole key ring in the door, one that included her house and car keys, Scott politely retrieved them and rode out in her car. And he made it all the way to Arkansas before he ran out of gas. And while he was standing on the side of the road shivering, a passerby stopped to help him. And this passerby was Dr. Sam Peebles and his wife, Suzanne. And Scott pretty much told them this story about how he was driving to Texarkana to pick up his girlfriend who had just attended a wedding when he ran out of gas. And so Dr. Peebles is like, okay, cool, we can take you to the next gas station so that you can get some gas and get back on the road. So Scott hops into their car, and as soon as Dr. Peebles starts driving, Scott pulls out the handgun that he stole from Rodney Lewis's house. And he told them that they're going to be driving for a while. And they drove for the next 6 hours through Arkansas and into Texas. And at some point in Texas, they stopped at the side of the road to use the bathroom. And during this roadside stop, Dr. Peebles was able to get to a gun that he kept in his car, and he ended up shooting Scott. But that damn Scott, he had some fight in him, and even though he was shot, he was able to wrestle Sam and get the gun out of his possession. And once he got the gun out of Sam's possession, he proceeded to pistol whip him on the side of the road. And Suzanne, bless her heart, she did try to help, but as she was trying to help, Scott pointed the .380 at her and pulled the trigger. Thankfully, though, nothing happened because unbeknownst to him, the gun that he had stole from Rodney's house was broken. And Rodney knew that the gun was broken. He knew that it wasn't going to work. It was just in his house because he ain't had nowhere else to put it. Anyways, after he realized that the gun wasn't going to work, he proceeded to beat Suzanne with the gun as well before driving off in their van, leaving them both on the side of the road. And after he took off in a van, Scott drove to the nearest convenience store where he told the clerk that he needed help because he had been shot. And so the clerk called 911 for him to get him medical assistance. And he was taken to a hospital in Lurkin, Texas, where he was treated for his wounds and then promptly arrested and then extradited back to Oklahoma. And once he was in Oklahoma, he actually confessed to the crimes that he committed. And a lot of what he said matched the evidence, but then there was some parts of it where you could just tell that he was lying. But in any event, Scott Eisenberg ended up being charged with second-degree murder for Patsy Cantrell's death, first-degree malice murder in the death of AJ Cantrell, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon for beating Carla, shooting with intent to kill Tyler Montgomery, because thankfully Tyler and his grandma Carla, they did survive their injuries. And then Scott was also charged with first-degree burglary of the Wright's home. Now, it never said that he was charged with burglarizing Rodney Lewis's home or the attack on the Peebles, who also survived their injuries. So I don't know what happened in those two instances, but nonetheless, the things that I just told you that he was charged for, he decided to take it to trial. And due to the nature of the crimes, death was on the table. And y'all, during this trial, we heard from his ex-wife, whose name is Roberta Eisenberg, who was not dead from a car crash, by the way. And she said that she and Scott were married from 1993 to 2003, and that they had 2 kids together, also not dead, by the way. And for all of the years that they was married, the family had lived in Detroit, Michigan, and Scott was an abusive alcoholic who couldn't keep a job. And me personally, I think that sounds about right. Because look at this. whatever somebody said he did it. And once the trial was all said and done, Scott James Eisenberg was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. And AJ and Patsy's family felt like Scott's execution couldn't come soon enough. They were just waiting on the day. But sadly though, while they was waiting on Scott's execution, the family would suffer another tragedy when one of AJ and Patsy's daughters would be murdered by her boyfriend in a murder-suicide. It's just like, damn, they can't catch a break. And the daughter who was on the news conference said that they was a family of 5. So it was AJ, Patsy, and they 3 kids. And 3 out of their 5 family members are now gone to murder. But finally though, on January 12th, 2023, almost 20 years after he murdered AJ and Patsy and wreaked havoc on the rest of these people's lives, Scott Eisenberg died of lethal injection. But before he was injected, his last words to the gallery were, "I'm at peace. My conscience is clear, completely. I love my children." And I was just thinking, like, is this the same children that you fictitiously killed in a car crash? Out here sounding like Puerto Rican Poppy? Okay. Anyways, I truly wonder though if Kathy feels any guilt behind this, because although I know it's not her fault and she did not commit this crime, I wonder if she feels bad that she left her husband for this man. And now her parents' neighbors is there, her son done got shot, and her mama done got pistol whipped. I'm almost sure though that there gotta be some guilt there. And hell, for John too, because he's the one who introduced this man to his family and friends, and then he walk up in your daughter's home and hit your son-in-law with the Mr. Steal Your Girl. Now your wife is beat up, your grandson is shot, and your neighbors is dead. And I really don't mean to make them feel worse about any guilt that they do have, because this is definitely not their fault. Scott did this, point blank, period. But it's really all just coming together to me like, damn, I would feel bad as fuck. Anyway, y'all, that is all I have for today's case. Thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know what you thought about today's case down in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. I'll do what you want me to do. I'm your freaky dancer, dancing for anyway, I'm your nasty dancer. I can't stop. And when he stops in front of the church, he and John explain. Anyhow, Scott asked, what was that? Anyways, Scott asked John if it was cool if he pitched a Anyways, John asked Scott, no he didn't. Scott asked John. Okay. One of these 4 people dropped John. Nope, not John. Anyways, after John, no, Scott, shit. And once he made it to Carla, Scott, no, yes. And one day, it was November 3rd, 2020. No. Let me get this together. Hold on. I'll be right back.